I'm Megan Belcher, and I'm the Chief Legal Officer of Kohler in Kohler, Wisconsin. And I'm also on the board of directors of Yakima Chief Hops, one of North America's largest hop suppliers. I'm a 2022 alumni of the Direct Women Board Institute and also a member of the board of directors. And for those of you who might be less familiar with Direct Women, for 19 years, Direct Women has focused on fulfilling its mission to increase the representation of women lawyers on boards of directors. We also have the ability to serve as a resource for companies seeking qualified board candidates and offer programming like this to create a pipeline of legal leaders who can effectively serve in corporate boardrooms. I'm delighted today to have David Kohanek with me, who is the founder of Board Voice. I'm going to pass the baton to David, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about himself and Board Voice, and then share his insights over the years of helping over 6,200 individuals find their way to the boardroom. David?
Megan, Yesenia, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Let's make sure we've got the screen sharing working properly here. Yesenia, are you seeing that okay? Very
Yes.
good. Very good. All right. Well, welcome everyone. And today we're going to be talking about how lawyers can elevate their personal brand and unlock new board opportunities. Just a quick intro on myself. Again, my name is David Kohanek. I'm the founder of boardvoice.com and thoughtleadership.com. I've been helping senior level professionals with their career success since 2002. So a little more gray in the beard these days. Former niche recruiter in the executive recruiter space, and I'm also a brand strategist for board members. But that's not really why you should be paying attention today. Why you should be paying attention, as Megan mentioned, is that we have completed over 6,000 professional branding projects for senior level leaders, VPs, EVPs, GMs, partners, C-level, and board members. And what I'm sharing today was informed by the lessons that we've learned over the last 9 years. What are we going to cover? First, the importance of setting a clear direction. Then we'll talk about creating your boardroom success proposition, developing the tools in your branding toolbox. We'll go through those in detail, positioning yourself as a thought leader, and also developing your networking strategy to really help this process along. Here's my promise. By the end of the training, you'll know exactly what to do to elevate your personal brand to better support your personal board goals. Okay, let's start with some big picture research. So let's take a look at the Fortune 500 appointments, and these appointments came from the study done by Heidrick & Struggles in 2025 for 2024 board appointments in the Fortune 500. First things first, let's look at age. You can see the average age is 59, and yet 72, so nearly 3/4 of all of those board seats were filled with someone between the ages of 55 and 69. If you're a decade younger, it's about 1 in 5 between the ages of 45 and 54. But notice also above the age of 70, it's less than 5%. So age is definitely one of the demographic factors. Then we go over to the right and we see the gender factor. Now, we all know a few years ago, there was a movement to getting more women on boards, and we actually saw the needle starting to move. Well, unfortunately, it's been pulling back again. And in this study, 2/3 of those board seats were filled by men. When we look at the education side of things, you can see the law degree only made up 8%. And that is, of the people who sat in those seats, only 8% of them had a law degree. So that challenge continues. And we'll go into some more detail there here in just a moment. But for those of you looking for your first board seat, the other thing to be looking at is you can see how that on the graph on the left, how it's been dropping down over the years, where it reached as high as 43% that it was in the Fortune 500 when somebody got the board seat, it was their first board seat. Well, now it's only 1 out of 4. And finally, on the right-hand side, this is the big challenge, right? For whether you're a practicing attorney or you are in a GC role or something along that lines, you can see that that C-suite experience is absolutely critical. Now, these numbers don't add to 100, right? So it says of those people that got that board seat in 2024, about half of them had played the CEO role at some point. They may have earlier in their career also been a CFO or a COO or some other C-suite, for instance, CLO, right? So this is really, really important. And we're going to come back to this in a moment when we talk about the lawyers on board specifically. But before we do that, let's talk about the search process itself when it comes to a board search. Depending on which stats you look at, somewhere between 20 and 30% of those board seats are going to be filled using a formal board recruiter, an executive search firm with a board practice. But that means 75% is going to be filled through networking and visibility efforts. And this data comes directly from Korn Ferry, Heidrick and Struggles. And so these are the firms themselves saying, look, we're not placing all of these board candidates. And that means that's actually good news if you don't have deep recruiter relationships, because you can be working your network and increasing your visibility and be considered for board seats. But there's a plot twist. This whole process isn't actually about you. Now you say, David, wait, that doesn't make sense. We're talking about personal branding here. How can that be? The thing is, the NomGov committee, what they're really asking is, does this person fill the boardroom talent gap? Yes or no? Because all the rest of this, if you don't fill the gap they're trying to fill, all the rest of this doesn't matter. There's a better suited candidate. So let's look at how this process works. You should be familiar with the boardroom skill matrix. Here's an example of one of those. So you've got the experience and expertise down the side. You've got the board members listed across the top, and then we're simply filling out where that expertise is. So for instance, let's say they're looking for additional technology expertise, especially in this day and age of AI and a very hot topic, especially in the risk management side of things. Maybe they're looking for regulated markets expertise as well. They don't have that represented on this board. And then finally, maybe they've got some board members who are aging out and they're looking to get some new blood on the board. And you can see that here. If they've got limits, for instance, at 72 years old, then they've got a couple of board seats that are going to be coming due. Again, if you don't fit the profile of what they're looking for, that is, you don't fill the talent gap that they have, you're not going to be the right board member for this particular board. So I went and I did some research on lawyers on boards, and I was looking for where are those key drivers when lawyers do end up on boards. And here's what we came up with. So these are the key drivers: regulation and compliance experience, risk mitigation, and this is all about sort of those regulatory signals long term. How are we mitigating that risk? Litigation management seems like a fairly obvious one. M&A transactions, the contracts and negotiation, absolutely critical in that. And then, of course, crisis management as well. So it's that handling of the high stakes ambiguity piece that this is here. But I went one level deeper. And I said, all right, well, why don't we take a look at the direct women alumni and those that joined boards just this past year? So these names should look familiar to you. And what I did was I said, okay, where's the overlap? Where's the commonality for these particular board members? So first off, what were the high impact areas? Securities law, governance oversight, M&A and other strategic transactions, regulatory environments, and they're bringing immediate value to committees because they've brought some of that value to committees in other seats that they've held. But there's also some multipliers here, right? So on top of that, if they have operational leadership roles, especially that C-suite, that is an absolute strong factor in getting selected for a board seat. Committee activity as well right? So if you've sat on committees or participated in perhaps task force, so for instance, there was an M&A transaction in your organization and you were tapped to provide guidance on that, that would count towards this as well. Industry adjacency. So you wouldn't necessarily have to be in the very particular niche. However, boards are looking for people who aren't going to have a long learning curve in general. Of course, there are exceptions to every rule. But again, what we did was we analyzed, okay, let's look at these alumni and what did they have in common? And the other was IPO or other transition experience, right? It could have been the sale of a company or something along that lines. And here are the committees that they have sat on and are sitting on within their new seats, right? So NomGov, not a big surprise, but compensation and people, audit, tech and transactions, sustainability. So they're really providing expertise across the different committees within the organizations that they serve. So what's the lesson here? What's the overall pattern? So look, if you are a general counsel, chief legal officer, and you've got that specific enterprise governance and risk experience, that puts you in a much better position to be considered a serious candidate for a board position. And when we think about the selection process at the board level, it really breaks down into three areas. The first is relevance, right? Do you bring the skills that the board needs today? Again, I'm coming back to that matrix and the skill gap that's there. If you bring that skill, then you are relevant. Credibility. So, of course, you've got credibility. The question is, does your positioning tell the story clearly and concisely? So this is really about positioning your expertise. That's what gives you credibility. And then finally, the visibility piece. Are you easily findable and referable by not just your network's network, and the board recruiters, right? You want to make it absolutely clear when someone sees your LinkedIn profile, when somebody sees your board resume, yes, this is someone who could bring value to our board immediately. We definitely need to have her on the list. Now, the path to your first or perhaps even your next seat can vary. So I'd like to share three brief stories here as examples. So one of our clients, Robert, a CEO, and he took a CEO position in a new industry for him. So he had one of these challenges where he didn't have the deep network of people within that industry. So what did he do? Well, he joined an association, then volunteered to be on the leadership side in order to build out his connections. And as a result of that, he did eventually land that first board seat for him. Stuart, a very different story. 20 plus years in a large healthcare organization, and he participated in a large M&A transaction within that organization. And as a result, because he added value in that process, he was asked to join the board of that new entity. And finally, Carol. So Carol had given a keynote at an industry conference. And at that conference, she met a CEO as a result of that presentation. A year later, that CEO invited her to join the board as well. So I lay this out, and there are many, many other stories, to say the path isn't always just absolutely clear, right? You work your way up, you take a GC role, you develop a board recruiter relationship, and then 2 years later, you've landed your first board seat. It's just not how it happens in the practical terms. So it can take a lot of different paths here. But regardless of your path, your personal brand, it matters, and it matters a lot. Now you might be thinking, well, David, of course you would say that, right? You're the founder of Board Voice, but don't take my word for it. Let's look at what some of the experts are saying here. So Betsy Atkins, 20 different public board seats in her career. She said, developing your own brand and your personal positioning is very important first step in the process of finding that right board for you. Carla Mashinsky said, you need to prepare your board documents, articulate the value that you bring, and continuously network to let others know that you actually want that board seat. And Jill Griffin said, since board seats are by invitation only, it's critical that your personal brand attracts, or more specifically, draws the right boards to you. So, regardless of your path, getting that positioning right first is really important. And we had one client, I thought this was just really, really smart. And he said, it's not just about my first board seat. It's about the next 3 to 5 seats that I'm aiming for over the next decade. And like I said, I thought that was a good way to think about it. So I would encourage you to think of your personal brand as an asset, right? You invest the time, you invest the effort to get it right now so that it continues to provide an ROI for you year in and year out. We all have a personal brand, like it or not. If people Google you and nothing comes up, well, that's part of your brand. And here's the thing, the competition for these board seats is increasing. So this graph demonstrates the trends over the last several years for the searches on the term board seat. It increased 9% in the past year and 50% over the last 5 years. And from a board position perspective, when people are searching for that, it went up 14% in the past year and 70% over the past 5 years. So it's never been more important than to make sure that you stand out and your positioning is absolutely clear. Now, I get it. The process can feel overwhelming, right? You've been successful in your career path. You've been doing all the right things to be successful. You haven't taken the time and the effort and really given it the strategic thought up to this point. So, how can you quickly and effectively build your board brand and raise your visibility? That's why we developed the Boardroom branding journey, a very simple step-by-step process. And we break this into 2 different phases. The first, board positioning, and then the second phase is the authority building piece. So we'll cover both of those here in today's presentation. So let's start with step 1, setting your direction. We've had prospective clients come and say, David, I could add value to any board I sat on. And I said, well, although that's interesting, unfortunately, that's not how the selection process works, right? And it really does vary. And it varies in a couple different areas. One is it varies by industry. So for instance, financial services, they're concerned about cybersecurity, IT risk, regulatory and compliance. Technology, yep, they have regulatory, but also public policy, geopolitical. We've all been seeing this in the news, ESG oversight. Energy and utilities, climate change, renewable energy, sustainability strategies. What about healthcare, pharma, life science? Well, now it's about digital health and data security, consumer patient experience insights. Do you see how different it is, the experience that what the financial services firms are looking for versus energy or healthcare? They're very different. And so you should embrace that difference and understand those industry expertise, the industry insights that you have and the expertise that you've built up over the years, perhaps over the decades, and really lean into that because that makes you one of the better candidates for filling that board gap when a client says, hey, we're really looking to fill this board seat. We want somebody with X experience. But it also varies public versus private, right? What public companies are looking for is not the same as what private companies are looking for. Sure, of course, there's going to be some overlap, right? General governance concerns, of course, AI concerns today, but it's not quite the same, right? Yeah, a private company, especially if it's a bit smaller and isn't international, isn't going to have the same concerns as a large conglomerate that has offices around the world. So you really need to think about, am I better suited for private or am I better suited for public? NACD announced in their event several months ago. They were talking about the difference between the two, and the number of private company opportunities has just exploded, and to the point where it's 3 to 4 times the number of board seats that public companies have. So also consider that as you think about targeting. Speaking of targeting, so we developed this model called the zero competition target. And we start with industry expertise. We've already in industry experience. We've talked about that. Then there's the functional experience, right? So have you been involved in contract negotiations and M&A transactions and so on? That's the functional piece of this. Then there's the passion piece. And no, I'm not talking about the old advice of follow your passion, but think of it in terms of what are the solutions? What are the challenges that you absolutely love finding solutions for? The problems that you love unlocking the answer to? That enthusiasm, especially if based on your industry and your functional experience, really is an attractive factor when boards are considering candidates. And then finally, the market need, right? If there's no market need, it doesn't matter. So it's that sweet spot in the middle that all four of these overlap in. That's where you have next to no competition. So you should be thinking about that as you're positioning your brand and as we talk about the board branding pyramid that we're about to talk about right now. So the pyramid itself, if you think about a pyramid where the foundation is the most important piece of this, that is your boardroom success proposition. And we're going to spend time on each one of these today. Don't worry, we'll go through this in some detail. Once you have that foundation in place, that is what sets you apart, what makes you the best candidate, that's when you then turn your effort to your board resume and your bio. We see so many people jump right into the writing process, but they're not clear on the direction up front. As the old saying goes, right? If you don't know where you're headed, well, then any road will get you there, right? So what we're trying to do here is get really clear. What is that true north? So now when we start doing the resume writing, the bio writing, it's making sure that it's in line with what you're actually trying to achieve. And then once we have that detailed career success story, then we can start working on your online profiles, your LinkedIn profile, your personal website. And finally, at the top of this is thought leadership. And don't worry, we'll go through this in some detail. I think there's a bit of confusion around the thought leadership topic, and we'll look to clear that confusion up today. So boardroom success proposition. It is the foundation of your brand, as we saw, but it's really the response to when somebody says, tell me about yourself. Well, when they say that, this is not the time to hesitate, right? You want an absolute, clear, concise answer that answers the question as to why you're the best board candidate. Here's why it matters. First of all, it quickly summarizes the value you bring. It demonstrates your functional expertise, but it also highlights your industry expertise as well. And that boardroom success proposition, as I'd mentioned, becomes the foundation of your brand. So let's look at some examples of this. First, a former CEO. I'm an East Coast-based former CEO of one of the world's largest global law firms and a current public and private company director. I bring deep expertise in governance, audit oversight, and executive compensation, shaped by decades of advising boards and leading large organizations. I'm looking to contribute to the board of a public or private equity-backed company where strategic governance and regulatory insights are critical to growth and to oversight. You say, okay, David, that feels like a mouthful. First thing, this isn't meant to be your elevator pitch. This is going deeper than that. This is setting the direction. What is your true north for your positioning? And let's break this up. So what does this first line actually say? Well, that describes who you are. What's the next line do? It talks about what you bring to the table. And finally, what are you looking for? So you can see in just 3 sentences, people can understand who are you, what you bring to the table, and what you're looking for. Now, a word to the wise, when this is done, it should be easy to read. It should be pretty straightforward. You say, oh, this makes perfect sense. I will tell you the exercise of actually building it can be hard, right? Getting it down to just those three sentences. It's taking your entire career. It's carving away the marble of your career to come up with this is very specific. This is where I'm headed. This is what's next for me. Let's use another example. So, former CCO, um, Chief Compliance Officer, in case anybody was wondering, and that I'm an experienced public company director and a former C-suite executive with expertise in governance, regulatory compliance, and cybersecurity. My background spans public tech companies and leadership roles across the U.S. Departments of Defense and Homeland Security. I'm looking to contribute to the board of a public or private tech company where my experience in governance, risk management, and strategic transformation can strengthen oversight. Again, who are they? What do they bring? And what are they looking for? So hopefully that helps clear that piece of it up and how you should be constructing that for yourself. So let's move into step 2. This is all about crafting a compelling bio and resume. So we're moving up the pyramid now. Now that we've got clarity on the boardroom success proposition, we can start to tell that career success story. Keep in mind, you get one shot at a first impression. And if your resume or bio, if they're getting passed around, oftentimes that is the first impression. So you want to make sure that you get that right. And you should be asking yourself, how do you want others to perceive you in that first impression? Because we don't control the market. We don't control the number of opportunities. We don't control the timing. But what we do control is how others perceive our career success and where we're headed next. Jill Griffin, again, the author we referred to earlier, said, your board resume is perhaps the most critical branding tool in your arsenal. And I agree. I think it's right in line nowadays with LinkedIn as well. And we'll talk about that in a moment. So what's the difference between a board resume and a corporate resume? So a corporate resume is really going to focus on the achievements and the execution within the role. From a board resume perspective, though, that's not what you're aiming to do. You want to raise it up a level and make it a bit more strategic. You want to be looking through your accomplishments through a governance lens, right? Rather than leading the team hands-on and leading the charge, how did you guide, right? And we all have some examples of that where maybe you got pulled into that M&A transaction and you weren't necessarily leading the team, but you were brought on as an advisor. That's very important. That differentiation is very important because that's what board members do, right? Yes, occasionally in a especially smaller private board, you may be asked to roll up your sleeves. But for the most part, there's a saying, head in and hands off, right? So they want your insights, but they don't want you to get overly involved or micromanage the management team. Yes, oversight and influence, as we had talked about. And also, design matters. And I felt compelled to put this in here because there's so much bad advice out there that I really want to clear this up. So not this. In other words, don't put your home address on your resume, especially now with the privacy concerns. You just don't need one more artifact out there floating around with your personal information. Skip the clip art. I saw a resume writer say, oh, I like to use the globe because then it shows that the client is a global executive. No, it doesn't. It shows that you found a piece of clip art and it's distracting. And finally, the extra charts, graphs, callouts, you don't need all that. Your board resume should look something more like this. Clean, concise, good use of white space, 2 pages. And sometimes we have people pushing 40 years of experience and say, how are we possibly going to get this down to 2 pages? Because remember, the step 1, the foundation. The foundation dictates what should be left in and what needs to be taken out, right? So that's how we get this down to 2 pages for somebody who has decades of experience. And from an order perspective, pretty straightforward. This really isn't rocket science. You've got the contact information at the top, the executive summary, which might have some areas of expertise. You may have some highlighted accomplishments. Sometimes we have room for that. Sometimes we just don't have room for it. Professional experience, board activity, and then education and certifications. Now, the caveat here is if you are a full-time board member, then the board activity moves up above the professional experience, right? Because now your role is a board member. And yes, you have executive experience as well, but that becomes secondary. From a board bio perspective, again, pretty straightforward. Contact information, the introduction, a summary, your current role, education, and board and advisory activity. Again, if you're a full-time board member, then obviously the order is going to change just a bit there. Okay, let's move on to step 3, building your visibility. So this is where we're moving all the way up in the branding pyramid. We're going to talk about online profiles and also thought leadership efforts here. Now, at the risk of ruffling some feathers, the old adage of, oh, it's all about who you know, I'm here to tell you it's not all about who you know. It's about who knows you. Make no mistake about this. You're going to need to go beyond your current network, and you're going to need to do some marketing of yourself. Consider this. There's a very good chance that you're going to join a board that you're not yet familiar with, and you're going to be collaborating with people that you've never met before. Let that sink in, right? There's a very good chance that that board seat that you have, it's going to come to you from a different path that you didn't expect. So the increasing your visibility is very, very important in this process. And here's the catch. Experience does not equal visibility. Even seasoned C-suite executives are often overlooked for board roles, right? They have the relevance. They may even have a good story, good positioning, but if they don't have that visibility and they're not easily findable, easily referable, then it doesn't matter, right? That's why you need the visibility piece here as well. We had one client say this, and I really like this concept. He said, I want to increase the surface area of my opportunities, which I thought was great, right? And that's what visibility does for you. So let's talk about some visibility elements here. Obviously, LinkedIn, we'll spend a few moments on that. Your own website, articles that you may have written that are published either in print or online, interviews that you may have been part of, or even a bio, right? If your board bio is out there, for instance, for a nonprofit board that you sit on, that's all part of your visibility elements. So let's start with LinkedIn. It's kind of the big one, right? This is where people go to learn more about your career success and also how you're thinking about the world today. And we'll talk about that. So how can you help them help you? Well, the answer is lower the friction, right? Make it easy. Make it easy to find you, to understand the value that you bring, to contact you, and for someone else to share your information, right? You're looking to, again, lower that friction. And this is a concept that I've borrowed from way back when I was an executive recruiter. Executive recruiters move so fast and they look at so many candidates. You get to the point in that role where you say, if you're making it too hard, if you're introducing friction in the process, the last thing I want to do as the recruiter is to pass that friction along to my client, right? So I'm going to move on to the next candidate, somebody who is well positioned. They've got a congruent story across their LinkedIn profile and their board resume. It makes it easy for me to introduce you to my client or to the nom-gov committee. So quick question, at a glance, which one of these profiles instills more trust? And of course, I've blurred faces and names to protect the innocent here, right? But you can see, even at a glance, that first impression, which might be LinkedIn, it can make a difference. And the clearer you are in your profile, the more professional you are in your profile, then again, you're reducing some of that friction that someone might have. So what would that include when it comes to LinkedIn? Have a complete profile. Don't have an incomplete profile. Make sure that you've got a strong headline. Make sure that your summary, the about section, is well written and clear, includes a call to action as well, by the way. Have a professional looking photo. Um, we used to do a session where we would talk about, actual LinkedIn profile photos, blurring out the face. And it's amazing. I'm sure you've seen it. It's amazing what some people have out there. But here's my advice. Let it be a head and shoulders shot. Don't let it be the cropped image from the wedding party where somebody's arms around you, and you've seen these things, right? So you really want to make it professional. Again, you're going for a board seat, and you're going to be part of that board's reputation. You want it to be professional. Also, with the AI photo tools now, you can take just about any picture of yourself and really turn it into a nice, compelling, professional looking headshot. Fill out skills. So LinkedIn has skills both at the high level section as well as the experience section. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to feed the algorithm beast, right? If we know that recruiters are searching for certain skills and it's showing up multiple times in your history, then obviously you've got that skill. You're very well known, and now the algorithm, you're bumping up your score, if you will, in terms of the algorithm. And then also recommendations. So let's talk about that. Think about this. It's not about the number of connections that you have. And that has become even less important in the LinkedIn algorithm here over the past year. But it's about who considers you an authority in your field. And what does that better than recommendations, right? So what recommendations can do for you is provide third-party social proof. They can give you enhanced visibility on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn has stated if somebody has recommendations versus a profile that doesn't, that one with the recommendations is going to get weighted higher in terms of the search results. And also, it gives context to your success. These are people who have worked with you directly, speaking to the value that you've brought. Think of it this way. Remember all that competition for the board seats, right? There are plenty of qualified people. They are relevant. They may or may not be credible in terms of their story, and they may or may not be visible. So what you're trying to do is stand out from the crowd, and not in a loud way, but in a professional way. That's what we're doing here. Now, what is the most effective visibility strategy? It's becoming a recognized thought leader in your niche, right? So here's the search. We were looking at search graphs earlier and trends. This is the trend for the last year. That last year is the bump there, 109%. So the interest, the growing importance of thought leadership has doubled over the last 12 months. You really should be taking this seriously. And here's the good news. I know a lot of people view thought leadership as a very difficult thing, and it doesn't have to be. Their thought leadership opportunities abound. You could write industry articles. You could, just like Rob did, you could become a leader in an association. That again raises your authority and the opportunity to be a thought leader. You could be on expert panels. Perhaps you're on a podcast interview or multiple podcast interview, all in your area of expertise. There could be speaking opportunities for you, right? Those events, those panels, volunteer events, those are all opportunities for you to, again, develop that authority and raise your visibility as a thought leader within your area of expertise. Or online training sessions, just like this one. What could you share to what groups in an online training session? All of us have something to share on that front. Start thinking about that. Now, from a LinkedIn post perspective, you should be posting on LinkedIn to go beyond just what you've done, but also demonstrate how and what you're thinking, right? Go beyond just the congratulations on your new role or reposting somebody else's thing, and really start saying, hey, I've got, and let's back up, right? Most of the people on this call are going to say, yes, I was through the .com, .bomb era, the financial crisis, COVID, now the introduction of AI. Well, how do you take those decades of experience and what's happening in the world today? And there's a lot happening in the world today, and then apply your insights to that and communicate those insights. Again, it's not about how many followers, it's about being an authority in your areas of expertise. So that's what you should be thinking about when you think about what to post on LinkedIn. We had one client say this. She said, I wrote a piece on thought leadership, a thought leadership piece, which I posted as an article on LinkedIn. It got tons of traction. I've had lots of people from my past and future commenting on it to say how helpful that was. She did this, got exposure, not just within her network, but her network's network. That was the future piece of this, but also recruiters as well. So it really does work as long as it fits your area of expertise. And just to prove that it works, here's a couple of examples. On the left, clients that just hadn't posted anything at all. And within a matter of a couple of months, we're getting significant impressions. That post on the right was just an example of one post. And notice I'm not putting posts up there that got 1 million impressions. If you're focused on your niche, right, you don't need 10,000 impressions. You may not need 1,000 impressions. You just need the right people recognizing the value that you're contributing so that it's improving your authority in their mind. Again, become that authority in your area of expertise. And again, trying to break this down and make it as practical as possible. How could you do this? Well, here's a process that we use with our clients. The first is record an interview. It could be a podcast, it could be a stage presentation, it could be an online presentation, does not matter. The important piece is that you record it. Now, if you say, well, David, look, I've not been asked to speak. I've not been asked to be on a podcast. I've not done online presentations. You can actually interview yourself. So you could say, look, here's my background. You could load that into one of the LLMs, a Gemini or a ChatGPT or a Claude, and say, develop a list of interview questions. And you could then interview yourself. Now, here's the trick. Do not type out the answers, right? Talk to the answers. So you could have that list of questions and just go through and answer those questions as you talk. Then from that recording that you have, what were the big takeaways? What are the industry insights? What strategic thinking came out of that? And then you can create a summary. You can fill in the gaps. Maybe you gave a presentation on stage and you just didn't have enough time to go deep. Okay, well, now you can fill in those gaps with some additional information. You can add context or case studies to it. This is how you're developing your writing style and your voice. I really like the idea of writing like you speak, right? If you're a very formal presenter, then your writing should probably be more formal. If you're more casual, then your writing should be more casual. Then you review it. Now, you can review it yourself. Sometimes we get the blinders on and it's a little bit hard to do that. So you obviously could use an AI to do that, or you could use a real editor, a real person who's going through and can refine it for you to get it production ready. And then finally publish, right? Publish it on your LinkedIn profile, publish it on your personal website, publish it on relevant industry websites. This is your intellectual property, right? Your intellectual capital. You can then publish this as you see fit. And again, this process, as you can see, it's not rocket science. It is step by step, and it's a way to really develop your own thought leadership library. I want to give you some examples because coming out of that recording, this is how you can also develop your signature framework. So here's a few examples. Fiduciary resilience GPS, right? Governance proof, safeguards, assurance outcomes. A model for thinking about technology risk. Here's another one in the HR space, the IP3 talent model. And what's interesting about this, we developed it for one of our clients. Now, if you Google it, it actually shows up in the AI results, right? So Google represents, and the LLMs are understanding what this represents. And then once you have that, you can publish it on your own website. Our advice to clients is you should have your own personal website. It really does expand that footprint of authority for you. All right, step number 4, expand your network. And this will be quick. This is, again, coming back to the understanding of, and in fact, McKinsey, Heidrick, they say, look, these seats are coming through your personal network, so you should be deliberate about building your visibility as early as possible. Engage with that network, right? Existing board directors and search firms. Participate in industry associations, share that expertise. Be active in governance communities, the NACD, a Private Directors Association, Direct Women. These are all very good examples. And consider joining advisory boards as a stepping stone. That's just one alternative. It could be nonprofits as well. These are all catalysts for a future board seat. Finally, staying informed. You can leverage Google Alerts and LinkedIn subscriptions both. I just wanted to do a quick overview on this. You should set up a Google Alert for your own name. Fortunately, with a name like Kohanek, that's fairly easy. If my last name was Jones, it's a little bit harder. Who are those the big companies in the industry that are defining how things are going? Keep an eye on what they're doing. Other industry news, relevant associations. And if you haven't done Google Alerts before, very simple. You could set them up for weekly or daily delivery. This is an example. I have NACD set up, so I get these alerts once a day. LinkedIn subscriptions, Gartner, EY, NACD. These are all the subscriptions that you should be thinking about on LinkedIn that are specific to your area. Again, and here's an example of NACD. So your personal brand is about making a great first impression and positioning you well for those board roles that you're most interested in. Here's what we covered: setting a clear direction, creating your boardroom success proposition and the importance of that, developing the rest of the tools in your branding pyramid, and positioning yourself as a thought leader, and finally, developing that network strategy and engaging with that network, or what we call the boardroom branding journey. So here's a 90-day action plan for anybody that wants to get into this. Month one, develop your assets. Go through, define that BSP, update your board resume, your bio, your LinkedIn profile. Month two, build the visibility, strategically expand your network, start those thought leadership efforts. And then month three and beyond, continue with your thought leadership efforts, go to the industry association events, engage with the board recruiters, and then actively pursue those opportunities as they come up. All right, so we still have some time here for Q&A. I will go ahead and stop sharing my screen. Megan, maybe you've got some questions that have come in.
I do. Thanks, David. Great deep dive. Do you have data or insights about the relevance of private equity or venture capital backed privately held companies and getting on those board seats as kind of an entree into getting onto a public company board? How useful are they?
Well, they're very. The short answer is they're very useful. NACD had a presentation several months ago at one of their events where they talked about the movement from public to private. Don't quote me on the numbers. This will be directionally correct, but there were 7,000 public boards at one point. That number's down to 4,000. The private boards in the early 2000s, there were about 2,000 private equity backed boards. There's now 14,000 of those boards. So first things first, it's a pure numbers game to understand that the number of board seats in the private arena are much greater, right? It's three to four times greater. So it would make sense that if you could be now, there are also very large private boards, but more public companies are moving towards private. So I guess what I'm saying is that sure, it's a great stepping stone, if you will, but I think they're also two very different board experiences. The public board experience is very much head in, hands off. The private board experience, depending on where they're at, the size of the board, are they in the middle of a transaction, you might be expected as a board member to roll up your sleeves and contribute that direct expertise. So hopefully that answered the question. I think I went a little bit deeper on it.
Great, thank you. It seems like a lot of seats are going to CLOs of public companies. As you talk about a public company board seat, what can CLOs of private companies do as they think about achieving against getting on a public company board?
Yeah. And again, I'll lean into is that the goal, and only just knowing that if that is your goal, that you're setting yourself up for a harder path to get there. The numbers are just working against you. That said, simply go back to a skills matrix and understanding where are the gaps on the public side of things. The other thing that I would do is I would look at CLOs and perhaps some of the alumni. I would look at their backgrounds and say, okay, what was their path? How did they get to that public seat? And then finally, call them, ask them what advice do they have? Somebody who's been down that path, especially if they had a couple of private seats and then moved into, and they've got that CLO experience as well, or GC experience.
Great, thank you. Do you have a recommendation on kind of the best places from a board recruiting firm perspective to invest time to make sure that you are seen and known?
Yeah, such a great question. So understand, especially in this market, you saw the competition for the board seats, right? Those board recruiters are not just sitting around waiting for a potential board member to send their board resume. Don't broadcast, don't blast out your resume. That is not a professional way to do it. You should never do that. What you should be doing is first identifying your target. Now, remember, you can't even identify your target board recruiter until you know where you're headed. So once you get your true north to say, okay, I've got this industry experience, this is what I'm aiming for. Now, who are the board recruiters that work in that space? And they are not the same executive recruiters that you worked with in the executive role that were going to find senior leadership. They have dedicated practices. So obviously you've got your big players, but if you ever looked at the list of executive recruiters, after you drop out of those top 5 or 6 firms, the size of those firms absolutely is tiny, which actually could work to your favor. Who are the boutique recruiters that work in your space that are much more likely to pick up the phone and have a conversation with you, that you can develop that relationship over time?
You noted the importance of a strong call to action. Are there a couple of examples that you could share with our attendees today as they think about crafting their own?
Sure. I assume that's referring to the LinkedIn call to
Yes.
action. Yeah, so it would be, first of all, connect with me if you'd like to have the conversation, and you can do this. These call to actions, by the way, can be threaded throughout your thought leadership and the posting that you're doing on LinkedIn as well. So connect with me is an easy one. If you'd like to have a conversation about this issue in this industry, love to compare notes, would love to have that conversation. It's not, if you've got an open board seat, right, send it over. That's not how it works. So your call to action should be, let's have a conversation, let's chat about it, let's connect, and then nurture those relationships over time.
David, as you think about many who use their LinkedIn more pure play for their brand as they serve as a leader in a corporation, do you have any suggestions around that or other avenues other than through LinkedIn as you think about a powerful brand builder
Mhm.
going out to the external environment?
Yeah, yeah. Again, great question. So, LinkedIn is not optional, right? You need to have that profile built, and you should be posting something out there. Again, demonstrating for when that board recruiter hits your profile that yes, you're thinking about things. Excuse me, and how you think about things. Your personal website, it does not have to be complex. But remember, I had that where we were talking about the thought leadership process where you go through all the steps. You're creating all that content. That content is an asset for you. It should be published on your website and on LinkedIn. And now taking it to the next factor, let's say you are an industry event, because that's where you should be. And you should be, yes, start as a participant, get to know the leaders, always talk to the speakers. Hey, how did you become a speaker here? Really start to understand that with the goal of saying, I want to be presenting in the areas that I want my expertise known. And doing that, and then going and saying, okay, I would like to do the speaker proposal for next year and really position yourself. But again, you do that speaker proposal, what are they going to do? They're going to look you up online. They're going to say, oh, well, is her LinkedIn profile, does it match? Is it congruent? Oh, she's got her personal website. Yeah, wow, she really is an expert. Yes, let's get her on stage.
Great. We've had a couple of participants ask if you're going to share the slides today.
Um, we are not sharing the full slide deck. However, the recording is going to be made available through the Direct Women YouTube channel.
Perfect. Thank you, David. And then one final question. As you think about our attendees today trying to put their best foot forward and build their brand, what do you think about podcasts?
I like podcasts. I like podcasts, and for a long time, I kind of discounted them. And more recently, connections that I have been encouraging me to do the same. David, you've done webinars before for very reputable organizations. Why are you not talking about this on podcasts? And some people will say, as I used to, right, but I don't really listen a lot to them. That's not what it's about. It's about, let's say a podcast has 1,000 downloads on it, but you're talking about your area of expertise on that episode. And that episode lives forever, right? Unless the podcast is taken down, of course. But that means somebody 6 months from now could be on a run, on a walk, driving to work, listening to you and you demonstrating your expertise. And that gives them the opportunity to then reach out, learn more about you, connect with you, start the conversation. So yeah, I like podcasts.
Great. Thank you. We've run out of time. What's the best way for people to find you if they have follow-up questions? As in
Sure.
addition to connecting with you on LinkedIn.
Sure. Yes. Well, thank you. Yes. Absolutely. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to do that. We have set up a page on boardvoice.com. So that if you go to boardvoice.com/direct women, you can request an appointment and we can have a conversation if you'd like to talk. And I believe the organization is going to be sending that out in a follow-up if somebody would like to make that connection.
Great. Thank you, David. It was wonderful having a conversation with you today and learning a lot more about how you think about brand and board seats. And we just appreciate all the insights. So thank you also to our attendees. Thanks for your great engagement, all the great questions. By signing up for today's webinar, you'll start receiving emails from Direct Women and our monthly newsletter, as well as special updates. Stay tuned for information about future webinars and information about how you can learn more about Direct Women and from Direct Women. And with that, I will say farewell. Thank you, David, and take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.